Hello, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends. This is Marcy, and welcome to Mawobo, the Highlands of the Davabzha Peninsula. Roughly 21,000 kilometers in total area, about the size of Mexico State, El Salvador, and the state of Hesse, and about a couple of kilometers smaller than West Virginia. With a population of roughly 25,000 people, the region's well known for its mining industry and its educational and research institutes. Mawobori, or Highlanders, are told to be learned, well-spoken, and very down-to-earth. However, they are also often perceived to be more introverted and closed off, busying themselves with their own scholarly works. However, this video isn't going to be about who the Mawobori are. Instead, this will be about the lands that they live in, the Davabzha Highlands, Mawobo. A quick rundown before we dive into the lands of wind and sky. I will first quickly go over my process of making this map and world building the region before I break down the etymology of a few named features on the map, alongside a few extra bits of geography to spice up the video a little bit. Alright, so let's start with the creation of the map. It started about 8 or so months ago, with a world map of all the continents, outlines for potential regions that I'd like to work on. The whole peninsula was chosen to be the home for the speakers of Thiwaprama, the Nabuthro. I then focused on the region, put in some extra detail for an outline of the peninsula, before focusing further on one particular section of the peninsula, the Highlands. All the placements, from the mountains down to the villages, were done with a few simple geographic rules in mind. This world isn't hardcore realistic, nor am I intending to be rigorously scientific or precise. However, guidelines are always useful. After I put together the features that dot the land, it was time to name them. Using a few naming guidelines and conventions, I ran the names through the language's sound and grammar changes, each varying depending on roughly when the settlement was founded or when the geographic feature was discovered. I ameliorated the names depending, once more, on how old the name is, to make it not only stand out from common nouns, but also to show its age. A month's worth of work later, the Mawobori, the Gashfurodne, the Highlands Map, is complete. I am planning to make more further detailed maps of certain towns, villages, and city-states in the future, which will be something to look forward to for you and I. So let's dig into the names on the Mawobo map, starting with Kuliklanak Inagachu, the mountain range. Kuliklanak means leafy mountains, from the words Kuliklo, leafy, and Inak, mountain. Pretty straightforward. The word for mountain range, on the other hand, Inagachu, is a tad bit more interesting. It was derived from the compound meaning mountain forest. The old Thiwaprama word for forest, Vichama, was also used in the sense of a collective or a group. Eventually, the word lost its meaning entirely, its original meaning for forest, but it did, however, retain its solar gender. So where the word for mountain is lunar, mountain chain, or range, is solar. Oof, off to quite a start. Next up are the two main rivers of Fuhilishve and Ma the Daiva. Fuhilishve is the second widest and third longest river in Davabzha, with a median width of about 2.5 kilometers and a length of 175 to 190 kilometers depending on how you measure it. Ma the Daiva is a contender for the longest river in the peninsula, but its branchy nature makes it tough to make a proper consensus on how long it is, and some Nabuthro would argue it doesn't count, for it meanders out of the peninsula inevitably. But back to names. Fu and Ma are solar definite articles. Ileshve was a compound of two words, Ileje, which means ferret snake, and Fed, an old word for river. Makes sense for a long, wide, snake-like river. The Daiva is a pretty heavy amelioration of the word Medeye Daive, which was a compound of the words Medeyede, the old word for to surround, and once again, Fed, river. The name was likely given for how encompassing and encircling this particular river system is, much like natural moats. It also helps that they tend to hug the cliffs as well. Translated, the names of these two rivers would be like Ferret Snake River, and the Rapping River. Back over on the counter-moonsward side are the towns of Ferildu and Fedabo. As some of you might have guessed, they're both compounds with that same old word for river, Fed. Ferildu was a compound between Fed and Hitorie, an old word for a bend or a turn. Fedabo, on the other hand, comes from compounding Fed and Zatbokye, an old word for farm. So they both roughly translate to river bend and river farm. Counter-moonish sunsward from that lie the two rhyming towns of Elejuzon and Odejuzon. The ending bit, zon, came from the word for edge or tip. Eleju comes once again from the word for ferret snake, ileje, whereas Odeju comes from the word hodeshfu, literally translated as the greens, meaning plains or valley. Translated, they'd be something like snake's edge and green edge. Traveling sunsward, we arrive at Davabzha, Ho Inaga Nabu, the gate to the mountains. The second most populous city in Mawobo, situated by the two waterfalls near the start of Fuhelishfe, and the crossroads between the moonsward and the counter-moonsward side of the mountains. In fact, the name actually translates to two falls, Benyo, two, and Demushia, waterfall, in the old language. Some of you might wonder how Demushie became the Uvja part of the word. Back then, its name was Fenyodmuye. Then, the D got dropped, M lenited to V, Y shifted to J, and then finally, unstressed U was dropped. The city was a hub for many people across the peninsula. The name was fated to ameliorate like that. Through the mountain pass, we come across the Kaliklinak mines. Before the mining settlements, we have the town of Najajanak. In the same vein with Imladris, or Rivendell, the name refers to the narrow valley that splits the Kaliklinak in twain. Vingel Jimsiingak was the old name for it, which roughly means Clovensburg. Out of the four mining towns, we're going to take a look at Inada and Stalashtachi. Inada means mountain's heart, basically center of the mountains. Inak, mountain, and Thak, heart. Stalashtachi is basically a shortening of a longer name, Stalathkazo Stachiaya, meaning roughly Skyheart's Lodge. You can see how it became from the start of both of those words. Now before we get to the last town name, I'm going to quickly go through some of the names some people have been curious about. Some of you that have asked on Twitter and on Discord. Fimujuva Bavufsha. Bavufsha is the word for sea or ocean. Fimujuva came from smushing the words Fu Demujowa together, which was the definite article and the word plentiful, basically the rich sea. Nyowoboashtu, from the compound Funyowawashta, which meant of two islands, due to its proximity to these two islands. I haven't named them yet, perhaps I might later. And lastly, Odeshfubaf, from the compound Odeshfubapshi. Odeshru meaning plains, and Babshi meaning home or settlement. Basically, plains home. So finally, the most populated city in the Highlands with a population of over 6,700 people, the mighty capital of the Highland Alliance, Fledayulon, First Harbor. She holds an area of about 154 square kilometers and a population density of over 44 persons per square kilometers. This was the site where the Nabuthro made first contact with other people, the Tlasilejo, whence the introduction to writing came. So even though they might not be the first harbor that existed on Davabzha, it held the fame of being the first harbor to encounter those beyond Shidalade's hand. Fledayulon is the heart and powerhouse of the Highlands, where the first teaching institutions originated, and thus ushering Mawobo a new, inventive age. As mentioned previously, Fledayulon means first harbor, originally from the compound Fledaiwo-Lombu, Fledaiwo being the old word for a first place, and Lombu meaning boats or ships, so literally the first place for ships, first harbor. And so concludes this video on the Mawobo map. I know fully well I didn't bring up all of the names written down on the map, If there are any names you're curious about, or if you have any questions about my world in general, you're more than welcome to ask down in the comments. I do hope you enjoyed, learned something new mayhaps, and I wish you all a good one, wherever you are on the world. Bye-bye!